Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. My name is Sandy Beach, and I'm an alcoholic. How y'all doing? It's real fun to be back with you all again and to participate in this roundup. I've had a great weekend, and I'm looking forward to going back to Washington and telling them some of the stories I heard out here and share with them how exciting the AA is here, just like it is back there. In thinking about what I might say this evening, I was just impressed with how much responsibility I think that we have to share with those of you that are here tonight that might be new in AA just what you've gotten into. Because when we're new, we have such a perception of things that just isn't quite the way it is. And as I recall back in my early months in Alcoholics Anonymous, even as I was sitting there, I just had my brain going a million miles an hour. Part of it was working on getting out of here, in all honesty. I was not attracted to the not drinking part of the program. I thought you were a little bit fanatical about that part. And if I recall, I don't remember anyone technically, specifically saying, don't drink. And I didn't remember reading it anywhere. And in the back of my mind, I sort of said, well, you know, no one really came right up to me and said, don't drink. And so if there's anyone new here tonight and no one has told you that, not drinking is really important. We have these steps and we have these meetings and we have sponsors and we have roundups. But none of that stuff works too well when you're drinking. I just thought I'd get that out of the way up front. It's sort of something that doesn't always come out in these talks. Seriously, I'm sort of in a happy mood. Next Sunday is Pearl Harbor Day, which may not mean a lot to most of you here, but it's my anniversary, birthday in AA, and so I'm looking forward, counting down. We have a sort of a pilots meeting back in Washington every Pearl Harbor Day. And if I don't take a drink during this talk, and no matter how bad it gets, I hope I don't, and keep that up for the rest of the week, why I'll have 22 years next Sunday. And as my friend Ed C. says, I didn't plan on sticking around this long. When I think about my plan for living, and I suppose that's really what all of us are generating ever since we're little kids. We're trying, or I don't know about you all, but in talking with a lot of the people I've met, that's sort of the problem from the day you arrive on this earth, is to try and figure out what the hell is going on. You know what I mean? And you're in school and there's other kids, and the problem is there's a lot of people who look like they know what's going on. And there's also a rule going around, or some sort of a unspoken situation, that you're not supposed to ask what's going on. You're supposed to figure it out. And so that's why growing up is such a painful process, because you're left, on the one hand, with figuring it out for yourself, and on the other hand, that's an impossibility, because the pride gets in the way and you can't go over and ask somebody, and it was kind of the typical dilemma of figuring out what life is all about. Now that I've been in AA for a while, I get these bizarre ideas every so often that I'm not so sure where they come from, but I do get them. You got to realize I'm a graduate of the Bethesda Naval Hospital Nut Ward, and so I'm certified to give this talk tonight. I always get a kick out of that, you know, that I went to Yale, and I went to the Marine Corps and flew and did all those things, but nothing I learned there qualifies me to be here tonight. What qualifies you to listen to me is that I graduated from the Bethesda Nut Ward in 1964, and that's what you relate to. You go, all right, I'm going to listen to that guy. He knows what he's talking about. He was up in the Nut Ward, you know. And there's a reverse snobbery in Alcoholics Anonymous. The further down you went, the more status you have, you know what I mean? At any rate, it occurred to me that this is the way life works. Right before we're born, God calls us in and assures us of what the universe is about, and that He is taking care of us, and there's absolutely nothing to worry about, that He is everywhere, that He'll meet every need that we ever have, and that we're going on an adventure, and that He'll be present all the way. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. We're His children. Just go out there and enjoy the wonderful sights and adventures that He has in store for us. Then He erases that from our memory. And leaves in its place a longing. That's all that's left out of that whole beginning. And we start the adventure out here, and the dilemma that I have found in my life was to figure out what that longing was and how to fix it. Because when all other dimensions of my life were fixed, so to speak, when I was getting good grades, when I had a good relationship, when I had some money in my pocket, when my health was good, when all of the things were in place that should produce peace of mind, there was still this, whatever you want to call it, I'll call it a longing. There was a dissatisfaction. There was some sort of a unsettling quality that lingered on, like, this still isn't it. And so the challenge, as I look back on it now, of life is to figure out how to fix that part of us that just isn't satisfied with life yet. And the funny thing is, we're given the answer, most of us, right when we're real young. And they take us to church, or they take us we hear some spiritual values, and we're told, oh, by the way, a higher power, a God, is an integral part of life's game plan, and that's what you got to get to fix that longing. And then as we start out, we misdiagnose the longing, and that's what I think did for so many, many years. I heard what was being said, but I didn't relate to it. And I don't think I was any different than the average person. You're out there, you're trying to figure this out for yourself. You don't really want the answers, and you're just going along and you're going, no, that's not my problem. My problem is I need a woman. That's what the problem is. I can tell. I'm 15 years old, and the most pressing problem, I can tell you right now, I don't need a higher power unless he has a phone number. So we rule that out as the answer to these various things, and start out trying to fix our own situation to the best of our ability. And we get sort of navigated through life by, as Father Martin talks about, by our instincts. And Bill Wilson writes about them in the 12 and 12 and the fourth step, and we are just sort of being jerked around by these, and they give us the fire and the energy to move on through life. They remind me of the fire underneath a steam engine. It's absolutely necessary to have these drives and instincts, or we wouldn't have any energy at all. But they can't end up being out of control, or the steam engine blows up if you have too much of a fire down there. So it's the question of getting a balance on all this. And for me, as an alcoholic, what fixed everything was drinking. The amazing thing was, for this particular person, as I was wrestling with all of the little problems that are just so typical in human beings, of figuring out life, of trying to fit in socially, of trying to have a relationship, of trying to understand how to accomplish things and, to just get whatever has to be done, along came drinking. And in my case, I was 19 years old, which is, as no longer I'm around AA, I realized what a late starter I was, but I made up for lost time because I was not one of these people who drank socially for years and years and years, and then their filter broke, and then whatever that story is, but about half of us seem to be in that category where we went sort of trouble-free for lots of years, and then boom, everything exploded. I drank socially about 2 or 3 minutes, and then went over the line and was out of control till I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. But what I'm trying to say is that the rest of the guys in my class who started drinking roughly the same time I did, I've had a chance to visit with some of them. They're not alcoholics. They still drink. And if I were to ask them what drinking is, we sit down, we have a conversation, they would tell me something like this. They would say, "Oh, drinking, that's great." So one of the things is it's a way of adding a wonderful dimension to a meal. You get a good wine with it, and it just sort of balances out a meal. And I'm going, boy. Or it's a nice way of, at the end of a day, of relaxing a little bit, and then once in a while having a group of people together, and it just sort of makes the evening a little more fun than it would have been without the booze. But not one of them says it's the secret of life. For me, it was the secret of life. In other words, I had found the mystery that we were put here for. Remember my little model, which is just off the wall, I realize, but it sort of helps me conceptualize this. I had stumbled on to the secret of life. I had fixed this longing. When I had the right amount of booze in my system, I was at peace with myself, with human beings around me, and with the universe. I felt all of these wonderful spiritual things that I heard people talking about, and I never felt when I wasn't drinking. It gave me something and fixed something that I don't think it fixed in non-alcoholics. And so I was on, in a sort of a strange way, I was on to the right secret to life. I had the wrong higher power. And it was a higher power. I look back on it now, I'm telling you, vodka was the functional equivalent of the higher power that I have here in AA. There's so many similarities that I can't count them all. It was something I had absolute faith in. Absolute faith. In other words, when I would go into a tough situation, never been into this circumstance before, you know what I mean? The first time you've ever done something. And if I could just pat my pocket and know that I had a flask of vodka in there, the fear went away. I didn't even have to drink it. Just pat the pocket. You know what I mean? I'd just go, "Hey man, what could possibly happen? I got my friend here." Mom, walk right in. So I could get the rewards of drinking sometimes without even drinking it. Just knowing, sometimes I'd look out, if I couldn't carry it with me, if I could look out the window and see my car in the parking lot, knowing there's a fifth in the glove compartment, I would go, "Hey, what are you upset about? Your car's right there." And I'd go, "All right, we're cool, we can make it." So I had this wonderful trust and faith in alcohol. And alcohol produced, it reminds me of the promises that we read in our 9th step in the big book. I would intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle me. I just, fear of economic insecurity would leave, and you just go, "Hey, I don't even have all the rent money. Set up the house." You know, just generosity flowed through me. I had access to feelings and love and power and energy and the ability to make decisions. I mean, I just, without realizing it, right from day one, had turned my life and will over to the care of booze. I had made a decision, without realizing I had made a decision, that booze would always be part of my life, because it did something very big in my life. So with that sort of tucked under my belt, I set out on this newfound discovery. I set out on my little journey through life, totally relying on alcohol. In other words, when there was a decision to be made, like, well, should I do this or should I would just go right to the kitchen, get a drink, and I'd go, in a matter of minutes, I will have the answer. Boom. I'd wait. Pretty soon this stuff would start functioning. I could feel the machinery turning down there and the circuitry getting activated. I felt like a battery. When you buy a new car battery, it's brand new. It's fully ready to start your car, but it needs to have water poured in it first. And I would sit there like this battery, not activated yet. And the system couldn't function. I couldn't make decisions. I couldn't see the world the way I needed to see it in order to be comfortable. And when I poured alcohol in, it was just like pouring water in that battery. Now I was ready to function. And it was the third drink, right around in there, that I was at my best. And there was a lot of side effects to drinking alcoholically. Puking, get arrested, passing out, punching people, fighting, getting your teeth knocked out. I saw those as imperfections that we had to work on. It was, I never really saw them as problems that would indicate you ought to stop drinking. This was just, hey, you got to get better at drinking. And that became the frantic search. And, so many of us in those early years, you're hearing all the instructions, and they're going, okay, now tonight, drink a glass of milk first, and then go out and see. And you probably won't get sick, and then this won't happen. Then somebody else is telling you, oh, have a warm beer in the morning, and then get the stomach settled down. There's all these secret formulas that you were... And so I just knew that it was only a question of time, and I would get the right balance in drinking, and then I would be on my merry way. Right now, it's a few little inconveniences, but they'd be smoothed out soon. I ended up joining the Marine Corps out of the school and did all my drinking there. I ended up flying airplanes for them, fighter squadrons and photo squadrons, and we went overseas and came back, and I was a flight instructor. But all of that was a hobby. That was something that got, 4 hours a day of my energy, and the rest of the time was focused around my alcoholism. It was focused around cleaning up the mess from the night before, trying to remember the lies that have been told, trying to anticipate problems, trying to understand the development of shakes and the lies and all of the problems as my life was getting out of control occupied me on a full-time basis as an alcoholic. And so as we hear our stories, and people are lawyers and housewives and career women and whatever, that's sort of the background music to the main event. And the main event was going on inside. And inside, I was getting further away from figuring out the problem. I was getting more uncomfortable and more dissatisfied with myself. And I had the feeling that I was lost. Someone once described Alcoholics Anonymous as the world's largest lost and found department. And that's what I think happens. We get here and suddenly I know where I am for the first time, and I get some bearings, and I get a start, and I get some reference points, and life suddenly becomes understandable, and that is what I am so grateful for from you all. How I got here, I think we all get here by the grace of God, and some instrument of His arrives in our lives. I haven't really heard too many speakers get up here and say, well, I was sitting around my living room one night, and I got to thinking to myself, gee, if I keep drinking, I might get in trouble someday. I think I'll just mosey on down to good old AA and come in a little early. Maybe that'll happen someday, but that hadn't really happened yet. The way most of us get here is like, hey, you, pull over. Breathe in here. And somebody in the DWI school says, go to AA. And we, against our better judgment, we come in here. Or your boss calls you and said, you got a minute? I'd like you to meet your replacement. Or maybe your doctor calls you in and said, listen, I wouldn't buy any long-playing records. I want to explain liver damage, and not in the abstract, your liver. And these kind of things get our attention, so to speak, and we find ourselves in the first of an endless series of things that we come to kind of kid about in Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill uses the word a lot in the big book. We encounter our first dilemma. You know what a dilemma is? A dilemma is one of these situations where neither choice is acceptable. The guy's standing up in front of the judge, and the judge says, you know, you've been in here for being drunk in public 10 times this year, so I'm going to have to really come down hard. Now, you're going to have to either spend a year in jail or go to one AA meeting. Now, we're laughing about that now, right? But before you get here, that is a dilemma. Because if you recall the drinking crowd around the bar, people who went to jail came back. But when those dirty communist AAs got them, you never saw them again, you know, so. Very often this young man would inquire, which jail? So we come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and then we encounter many of the dilemmas that this program has in store for us. And I certainly recall them. I remember a dilemma is these things where you just are struggling with these incredibly difficult situations. You remember how we struggled with, am I an alcoholic? I mean, I know God has a sense of humor. I believe that in the bottom of my heart. When He watches one of us struggling with, am I an alcoholic, He must be falling on his rear end up there just going, look at this. You know what I mean? We're sitting there, we're going, I'm struggling with this. I remember when I first came in, I had gotten out of the nut ward after 6 months. And I was an outpatient. I had to drive from the Quantico Marine Base every weekday up to Bethesda, stay there all day, and then I could drive home at night, and I could stay home on weekends. And on one of those weekends, I had a beer. And this is before I called my sponsor and got into AA. They had sent us to a few meetings in the nut ward, but I had this beer because I was caught on what I call the Washington Redskin dilemma. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had a rule. We all have rules, right? You know, I had a rule that I never watch football unless I'm drinking beer. So I was left with sitting in front of the set with it off. So I said to myself, geez, why can't I have one beer, then I can watch the game? And I had a beer and nothing happened. You know what I mean? I went to bed and I didn't get drunk. I slept like a baby. Went back to the nut ward. Didn't tell anybody I'd been drinking this beer. But I was so excited at now being a former alcoholic. And I just kept this thing going in my head. You know, am I an alcoholic or not? I mean, how could I just had the beer and nothing happened. And I went for like 4 days. I didn't sleep or eat. Couldn't do anything except think about that beer and how free I was of booze. Free at last, you know what I mean? Totally obsessed with drinking, and I'm thinking I'm free, but I sat there, and so I was on this dilemma, am I an alcoholic or not? So I remember, you know, I don't know about that, but I have conversations with myself. I'm over here, and I'm over here. I'm like Clancy, you know, he's at a committee meeting in his head going on all the time. And so I'm weighing these things back and forth, and I'm going, okay, let's mentally imagine your life, and we're going to start stacking up the evidence, whether you're an alcoholic or not, you know. Imagine the balancing scales of justice, and we'll put all the evidence over here that you are an alcoholic, and then we'll put everything over here that you're not, and we'll see how the scale comes out. We'll be fair about this. So I started out with, over on the side that I'm an alcoholic, I put, okay, you're in a nut ward. Okay, I put that. You know, let's be honest. I mean, you know, we got to be fair about this experiment. So I put that I was in the nut ward and that my Marine Corps career was probably over due to my drinking. Okay, put that in there. All right, let's put that you've never, ever had a drink that you didn't get drunk. Okay, let's put that in there. And your whole family thinks you're an alcoholic. Okay, let's put that in there. And all the doctors on the nut ward say you're an okay, let's put that in there. And all the trouble you've ever gotten into, your teeth get knocked out, being in jail, all of these things. Okay, let's put that in there. Well, that's about it on that side. Now, over on this side, we have this beer that I just had. And I meant sort of just put that empty can over on this side, and the scale just went boom. And I said, you know, the reason it did that is the beer is much more recent evidence. That stuff is all in the past. This is in the now. Well, you know what happened. I got some vodka and just got in a lot of trouble in a matter of a day or two, and that's how I ended up calling AA and got a sponsor. And he was a great big Marine who came into my life and banged on the door and said, my name is Bill. This is a 12-step call. I talk, you listen. I said, could you leave some literature? He said, get in the car. So you understand how my life was in those early months, and I just wanted to get away from him, but I never did. He's still my sponsor. He's still in Washington, and we're just a lot older now. But anyway, getting back to the dilemmas, anyway, he got me to the meetings, and that kept me physically sober, not drinking and going to meetings, not drinking, going to meetings. But obviously that isn't going to do the job, because there's a second part. And I say this for anybody who is new. I really believe this at the bottom of my heart. Early on, some smart aleck speaker got up somewhere and said, if you're in AA and you're not happy, you're doing it wrong. And I went, oh, give me a break. I didn't like that statement at all, because that put the thing right on me. And I was laying it on all this stuff out here. I'm going, what about I don't have any money? What about and all those things, you know? And they were going, no. If you're in here and you're not reasonably comfortable and happy, you're doing it wrong. And I'm going, what the hell kind of a statement is that? How could they make a claim like that? Everybody's got different problems. Somebody's got illnesses and divorces and job problems, you know, all that stuff. And they said, oh, yeah, well, what about back in the drinking days? Do you ever remember alcohol failing to do its job. And I had to think back and realize there was a lot of uncomfortable situations going on when I'd be out drunk having a wonderful time. Alcohol had the power to make me happy under any bizarre situation. And the power we got in this program far exceeds that of alcohol. So all I have to find out is how to get lined up right with this power source, and it will make me reasonably comfortable through any situation. And when you think about it, it's an absolute necessity. I don't think it's possible. There's some people with a lot of willpower. Maybe they can do it. But I don't think it's possible to stay sober and unhappy very long. It gets real tough. That's what we do when we try to stop drinking on our own. And I remember doing that once. My personal record was 8 days. I went 8 days when I was about 31 years old, and some Marine Corps colonel just gave me the riot act one time about drinking, and he would never fly with me, he'd never have me in his squadron, and he'd drunk, bum, rotten, boom. I mean, it really hurts. That's what this guy said. I thought, oh, I'm going to not drink. You're right, I'm not going to not drink. So I went through day 1. It was awful. I hated it. And day 2, 3, 4, and now I was up to day 8. And I was reading some insurance thing about actuary tables, and they indicated the average lifespan of the American male in this country was 75. And I was 31. What is that, 44 years? I said to myself, hey, 44 more years of this. I think I'll get me a quart. And you know something? I was right. Anybody who was faced with 44 more years of that ought to drink. But that's not what we're faced with in AA. We're not faced with that kind of sobriety. If we were faced with that kind of sobriety, I don't know if we'd make it. No, AA gives us the second thing. AA gives us the gift that we're unable to give to ourselves. That's why it's so difficult to stay sober on our own. It may be possible to stay sober, but it's pretty hard to stay sober and happy. Sober in peace of mind. Sober and content. This is the gift that we get here in Alcoholics Anonymous that makes staying sober relatively easy. I mean, why do you have to drink if you're happy? You know, if life is pretty comfortable and you're going along and it's making sense, it's much easier to stay sober. So we don't ever figure out our alcoholism in Alcoholics Anonymous. The solutions that we get in here, and this again is for anybody who is new, and a lot of the old-timers know this stuff cold, but the solutions that we get here in Alcoholics Anonymous are a little bit different than the kind of solution that you and your intellectual mind has been used to looking for. You're looking to figure out problems. You're looking to figure out why you're an alcoholic, and then you'll be able to do something with that information. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't figure out the things at all. You know what happens to your alcoholism? It gets removed. It goes away. It disappears on a daily basis, contingent on our spiritual condition. We don't work on the problem, we work on the answer. We work on our 12 steps, we work on our meetings. And we get all through working on those things and we get home, we suddenly realize we forgot to worry about drinking last week. How the hell did an alcoholic forget to worry about drinking last week? But that's what happened. We go, isn't that amazing? What a coincidence. I said a prayer and I forgot about drinking. I would have forgot anyway. It would have happened anyway, you know what I mean? Because it couldn't happen due to this prayer and higher power stuff, because if it did, I'd have to change my mind about the higher power. And for an alcoholic in the early stages of AA to change their mind is like the Queen Mary turning around in the Mississippi River. It is a major, major undertaking. Most of us call a press conference. Hi, I'll be changing my mind later tonight. I thought I'd call you all in. It's something that doesn't happen very often. Our family goes, we know. Even confronted with the obvious, I don't change my mind. I have convictions. This is the extent of our pride. We'd rather stick with a lousy idea and go down the tubes with it than admit we're wrong. I remember the first debate, real good one, I got in with my sponsor, and finally, like you do in AA, you never win a debate. You know, those of you that are new, you're never going to win a debate in Alcoholics Anonymous because we invented the game you're playing. We know the lie you're getting ready to tell, and we're not going to play by fair rules. It's not going to be an intellectual proof where you lay out something on the blackboard. We're going to always turn the conversation back to results. And we're going to say, hi, look at all the people in the room. 2,500 people here. They all have X years of sobriety. You're still drunk. These people have nice new clothes. They have cars with current registrations. And you're wearing a little wristband from a nut ward. So, we're just not persuaded by anything you're saying. And you go, well, that's not fair. We're not supposed to have a discussion based on results. It's supposed to be based on theory. And so, well, we're not interested in theory here. We're interested in results. We like to see sobriety. We like to know how long somebody's been sober. We want to see how their life is going. We love to talk to their family. No, I don't think that would be a good idea. I don't think we want to talk to them. They're all screwed up. They would tell you all kinds of stuff about me. You don't want to talk to them. So anyway, we come in here and we start getting caught with all the dilemmas of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as I said earlier, I do think our higher power has this incredible sense of humor. He's throwing these dilemmas, and the answer is so obvious. That's why they're so funny. When I finally admitted that I was an alcoholic, it was like on a Wednesday, okay? On Tuesday, I'm not an alcoholic. On Wednesday, I've been one for 11 years. That's a major change. You know what I mean? It was there. The denial was so strong because if I admitted I was an alcoholic, the implications were incredible. No drinking, a meeting every night. I had a sponsor talking about going to a meeting every night for 10 years. I mean, this guy had no slack. It was like, no, I don't care, you know, this or that. We're going to a meeting. You can do that. And so the implications of being an alcoholic were just incredible. And there was no half measures. There was no way to partially get sober. You know what I mean? There was just this extreme that we find in AA because it's a spiritual program. And we have this line in our Chapter 5 about half measures availed us nothing. So we don't figure these things out. We just have them removed. But what I've had to do in the years that I've been in AA, more than anything else, is change my mind. That has been how I have moved ahead. Chuck Chamberlain talks about that. Uncover, discover, and discard. And finding something else that I'm wrong about and dumping it. And I was starting to talk about that first debate that I had with my sponsor when I finally realized that he was right. And I said to him, you know something, Bill? You're right. And I really thought I was being humble. I just went, you're right. And he said, no, you're wrong. And I said, yeah, you're right. And he said, no, you're wrong. And I found it was much harder to say, I'm wrong, than it is, you're right. You know, even in that situation, I didn't want to say the words, I'm wrong. It was like a cosmic referee would blow a whistle and throw me out of the game. Wrong? Get him out of the game there. He doesn't get to play anymore. I was just stuck with this thing of not wanting to be wrong. And so we come charging into AA, and they hit us with this powerlessness, and our life's unmanageable, and this terrible first step that is so dramatic an entrance to come in here. I mean, totally powerless and unmanageable. You know, you're out of control is what they're suggesting. And as soon as they get you beat like that, they hit you with, how about a higher power? And I didn't want anything to do with a higher power. I didn't believe in a higher power. I went to church. I stopped going to church. It wasn't convenient. I didn't feel good on Sunday mornings, and none of that was working. I was busy. I had lots of things to do, and I was now in AA, and they were saying what I really needed was a higher power, and I said, you're wrong. What I need is a $2,000 loan. That's what I need. Maybe you need a higher power, but I need a $2,000 loan. And I saw that as the answer to everything. You just give me $2,000 and I can fix a lot of little problems that are out there, little messes that need attending. And once I got that, then I'll have time to come back and talk about higher power and prayer and meditation. But that stuff has to wait because life has all these things that are being thrown at us all the time. Well, being confronted with this second step, am I going to believe in a higher power? Came to believe that a power greater than I. And I think about that, and relax, I'm not going through all the steps. I will stop on time. I just have a couple that I like to fool around with and talk about. So, anyway, this particular one, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I tell you my early experiences with the second step. As you know, this step is contained in the chapter to the agnostic in the big book. And I got my big book, and my sponsor, I don't know if any other new people, if you're doing this, you'll see we're on to you. You watch. I'm just going to tell you what you might be doing if you're have a ratty little brain like mine. My sponsor said, get a big book. I want you reading this thing. This is a real important book. Everything you want to know. He sounded like Ed McMahon on the Johnny Carson. Everything you want to know about everything is in this book. And you go home and read that and learn around. And so I took the thing home. I said, this guy is serious. And I had already seen the steps on the wall at a meeting, and I saw nothing of interest in there at all. I could tell, like so many of your smarter than average alcoholics, I could tell without doing them they wouldn't work. Could tell ahead of time. And so I knew that wasn't going to be for me, and there was certain a fanatical element in AA, and then there was the rest of us who were put the plug in the jug and go to the meetings, leave everything else alone, mess with it. I like that approach. Sounded real good. Of course, most of those people were miserable, but they were hanging around. And so I took the big book home, and I started turning all the pages, folding them, got a yellow marker, underlining just anywhere. But, wow, I really like that one. Oh, this is good. Then I got a coffee cup and put some coffee stains on a few of the pages. I had that book in about an hour looking like, it had been used for 10 years. I mean, that book had seen some action. Then I put it up on a shelf in case my sponsor ever said, hey, how's the big book? Hey, let me tell you, here's something here I like, Well, in flipping through the big book, I saw the chapter to the agnostic. And again, knowing things without reading them, I knew what was in the chapter without reading it. Obviously, this is the chapter to the people in AA, to the agnostics, who don't want to do the steps. Right? Obviously, that's what that chapter is, and that's obviously where I was going to end up. And I had a certain peace of mind to know that chapter was there when I got around to it, because I wasn't going to get into all this higher power and spiritual stuff. Well, if you're new and you've done that, and let me tell you what's in that chapter, and then I can save you reading it. It's about 7 or 8 pages long. Save a little shortcut. That chapter says, change your mind. That's what it says. It says, become a former agnostic, is what it says. And this is how the deal works. And this is how I envision the second step. You come into AA, and the way that the first step is taken is we take you up to the top of this building, and we say, welcome to AA, and throw you off. And you're noticing the parking lot is coming up real fast. And all of a sudden, a big hand called the second step reaches out and grabs you about 8 feet from the cement. And it says, excuse me, we're conducting a survey. Do you believe in God? And and if you're like the average person, you go, no, but I'm willing to reconsider. You are now in the process of getting an open mind. Now, later on, you will deny that you ever got thrown off the building and this big hand came out. You will be up at the podium saying a statement like, and then I decided to take the second step. Making it sound like an intellectual process. And so again, for the benefit of our newcomers, let me interpret our AA language for you, that when the speaker says, and then I decided to take the fourth step, what he's really saying is, then my sponsor said he would break both my legs unless I took the fourth step, so then I decided to take the fourth step. So in taking that step, I always think of Jack Benny, who had the funniest thing, because there's a wonderful dilemma that Bill writes about in that second step. And if you recall, Benny was the great comedian about his cheapness, and he wouldn't part with $1. And on this radio show years ago in the 30s, he was walking down the hallway, and all of a sudden you heard a stick-up man say, "Stick 'em up. Your money or your life?" And then started this incredible silence. Silence. And 10 seconds go by, and 15 seconds, and the studio audience is cracking up. And finally, out of absolute frustration, the stick-up man says, "Well," and Benny says, "I'm thinking." And you sit there and you go, how hysterical, this dilemma that he's caught on. And Bill writes about one in our second step in that chapter, The Agnostic. And it's a very simple little sentence, and it says, to live on a spiritual basis or to die an alcoholic death is not an easy choice to make. And there it is. Well, am I going to die an alcoholic death? You know, and you sit there, and we're so uncomfortable with the idea of living on a spiritual basis. I don't know what I thought that meant. I thought it meant no fun. That was number one. But I just was so put off by that idea that I was going, well, how bad is an alcoholic death? Wait a minute, let's just find out, you know. Maybe if it's short and sweet, what the heck? I mean, you know. It's just kicking and screaming, and so under all sorts of dire circumstances, I changed my mind, like so many of us before me, about the idea of a higher power, and that has been the greatest gift that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me. You gave me what was missing. You fixed that longing. You fixed the fundamental problem in life. Once I became willing to follow the directions, to line myself up with this force of the universe, it's as if there's little holes in my body that just have to be put a certain way by taking inventory and removing character defects and getting this stuff out of the way that's blocking this infinite supply of energy and love and understanding into my life. That's what you gave me. And that is the wonder of sobriety. I don't think it requires as much faith as I used to think it required. I like the idea now of the simplicity of simply turning it over. I just think of that as the most wonderful thing that happens to us. And how in life, on other occasions, how eagerly I have accepted things that have been taught to me, and how I fought this idea of a spiritual program. As a Boy Scout, I remember the scoutmaster saying, all right, today I'm going to teach you about the compass. This is a wonderful little thing. It's about as big as my watch here. And he said, see this little thing here? And the kids were sitting out there going, oh, yeah. He says, you know, if you have this thing, you can be lost in the woods. You have any idea where you get this thing out, you can find your way anywhere. You go, really? Well, how does it work? Well, there's this big rock up at the North Pole. And this little needle on here points at it. Well, I don't ever remember standing there going, did you hear what he said? There's a big rock at the North Pole. I don't remember saying, I want to go see the rock. So I'm not going out in the woods until I see the rock. I'd already taken this whole deal, as absurd as it was. And I'll be damned if that didn't work. Take that thing and you go around, you can navigate all around. You got a power coming from the North Pole, or however that magnetic field works. And that little sucker, if you know where you are, you can navigate around. And now, you know, that's what happened to me in AA. I finally found out where I was, where the starting point was the day I got here, and I was given the map, I was given the directions, and I was given the power source to navigate along a day at a time, and it is incredible. It is the most wonderful thing to be able to see what's going on and to see life from the view we get in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a lot easier to see how the days are going when you're not in the gutter. The view is so much better up here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We get lifted above the alcohol problem. And as long as we stay up here by doing the things that are just set forth for us a day at a time, we always have the view of sobriety. And when that happens, the temptation to drink just isn't around. It's when I forget, or when I decide on a daily basis, I'll handle this one on my own. I don't know why I do that, but every so often I'll... And as soon as I'm handling it on my own, all the jerks in the world come back. They just show up all over the place. They're in traffic, they're out here, they're at work, and they're stupid on the phone. And it's just awful. And then I go back and I tell my sponsor, the jerks are back. And he says, you were handling it alone today, weren't you? And I said, yes. So what we're given, and what I've been given, is a higher power. Boiled down to in its simplest form, that's the great gift of AA. It's as if we came here trying to figure out a drinking problem, and we were given the answer to life. We were given a solution that I think is the most beautiful present that can be handed to a human being. In closing, let me just tell you a little story that I've always liked to share, and it concerns the continued dilemma here in AA of working the program. There was this little boy who was playing on a baseball team in grammar school, and he loved to win, and he really wanted to do well. And he woke up one night about 2 o'clock in the morning with the beginning of a toothache. And it was just tinging back there, and he knew that if he called his mother and got a couple aspirin, that the aspirin, and he could go right back to sleep and he'd be well rested for the baseball game. But he didn't do that. He decided to wait and see if it would go away on its own. So he waited about an hour, and now it's getting worse. You know how it gets louder and it's starting to jangle a little bit harder. And he said, well, maybe I'll call her now. No, I'm going to wait. It's possible it could go away. So he waits another hour. And finally, about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, he calls out. She comes in. What's the matter? Oh, toothache. Oh, well, here's a couple aspirin. Takes a couple aspirin. And now he goes to sleep. But when he gets up the next morning, he's not well rested, and he doesn't do as well as he would have liked to. And the question is, why did he wait 2.5 hours to get the 2 aspirin when he could have got them right away? And the answer lies in the fact that he knew his mother. And he knew that she would be delighted to bring him the aspirin. The problem was she wouldn't stop there. She would call the dentist and make a dental appointment. And when he got to the dentist would go, where does it hurt? And then he'd look in there and he'd say, hey, while you're here, let's give you a total mouth examination. And he would search for every cavity in his mouth and make a series of appointments until he had a perfect mouth. He did not want a perfect mouth. He just wanted 2 aspirin. His dilemma and our dilemma, the only help that's available is perfect help. That's the dilemma with a spiritual program. It forces us to try and become better than we had intended on trying. In the 7-step, Bill writes about, we'd like to settle for as much perfection as would get us by. I'd like to have a reputation as an honest businessman rather than being an honest businessman. And that, to me, is the wonderful fun of an ongoing program of sobriety. We are pushed along a path that most of us never would have chosen. Because of our alcoholism, we have to stay on it. And we get all the wonders of a newfound higher power. And for those of you that are new, you are embarking with this wonderful crowd that's here tonight on the absolute trip of your life. If you think that anything you've done in the past was supersonic and out of this world, you ain't seen nothing yet. Thanks a lot. Thank you.